following Chalk Talk is brought to you by Isolite, the emergency lighting experts. Stay educated, my friends.
I never worry about the problem. I worry about the solution. NBA great and famous world-renowned philosopher Shaquille O'Neal said that. And I think it's perfect for today's Chalk Talk discussion, covering some applications where sometimes can be challenging, but we have some really creative solutions that Evan Ackman, our Director of Product Development, will be discussing today. Good morning, everybody. I'm Matt Bird, Eastern Regional Manager, along with Greg Keel, Western Regional Sales Manager. Evan, please go ahead and take it away for us, sir.
Thanks, Matt. And I think that's the first time I've ever heard Shaq being called a world-renowned philosopher. I always think that he's sort of a world-renowned product endorser because he endorses a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, he did not endorse this next video I'm about to show you, but I am excited to reveal to you the next in our series of highlights video to kick us off here. And of course, it's about self-luminous exit signs. So here we go. I really like those highlight videos because it sort of forces us to get right down to the brass tacks of what makes these products important. Now, you longtime Chalk Talk attendees will know that early on in the Chalk Talk series, we actually did a presentation about self-luminous exit signs and the technology behind them. We really spent our 15 minutes talking about exactly how they work. We covered some of the fun details about borosilicate glass that's used in the tubes. And there were a lot of questions that came up after that Chalk Talk, particularly related to the applications. And we wanted to go back and revisit that and talk about self-luminous signs again with a little bit of a different focus. We'll start very quickly and talk about code and really what parts of code allow for all of the flexibility of the self-luminous exit signs. I'll just touch very briefly on the technology that's used here and how that technology is in service of what code mandates or perhaps doesn't mandate in this instance. And then I really want to spend the meat of this talking about the applications. There's a lot of things that makes these exit signs pretty special, and the applications that they can go to and the flexibility that's provided is very unique. And so I wanted to just highlight a couple of my favorite representative applications that really are superstars for self-luminous signs. At the end, we'll go through our quick product guide just to talk about what the products are. And then the other thing I wanted to do that's a little bit different from some of the other Chalk Talks is I wanted to do a quick frequently asked questions slide. Again, when we did our last Chalk Talk, there were a number of questions that came up in the chat and via phone calls after the fact. And I wanted to just, walk through what the appropriate answers were, because I do think that there are a lot of questions that are related to self-luminous signs. As always, this is a Chalk Talk, so you guys are muted. If you do want to ask questions, feel free to throw it in the Q&A feature of Zoom or right there in the chat. We'll make sure that we answer everything by the time we all get off this call. Now, as is typical with Chalk Talks, I do like to open up with code. And the cool thing in this instance is there's nothing about NFPA 101 that calls out self-luminous exit signs by name. But the thing that gives them all of their flexibility is this section 7.10.9. And if you've been on our Chalk Talks before, you've heard me talk about testing and maintenance of exit signs and emergency lights. But what it says particularly is exit signs connected to or provided with a battery operated emergency illumination source where required in 7.10.4 shall be tested and maintained in accordance with 7.9.3. And we're not going to go through all those cross references, but as a reminder, what it says is battery-powered life safety devices require monthly and yearly maintenance. Monthly requires a 30-second test. yearly, it requires a 1-hour test. And what really makes that cool is self-luminous exit signs don't require batteries, and so they're exempt from that requirement for monthly and yearly maintenance. Now, as a reminder, the way that these devices work, the reason why they don't need batteries, they use physics as their battery effectively. These self-luminous exit signs utilize tritium gas that gives off electrons and positrons through radiation. That emission impacts the inside of a glass tube that is coated in a phosphor. That phosphor then emits photons in response. And then what you see is a lit exit sign, despite the fact that there's no power going to it. There's a diffuser panel that sits in front that evens it out, so you don't just see those tubes, and it actually reflects light when there's a lot of light in the space. And the combination of all those things combined with the long life of tritium gas means that these exit signs work without AC power, without batteries, without anything. They're just hang and bang. And that's really what makes these special. And maybe it's obvious, and I'm going to just beat you guys over the head with it today. No batteries means no maintenance and no AC power required. If you don't require AC power, then you don't have to get wires to these devices. And if you have no wires required, that actually gets you to all of these super flexible installation scenarios. And that it doesn't really require a special type installation to utilize a self-luminous exit sign. The maintenance reduction is often enough to sort of make the math make sense. If you think that a traditional exit sign, each one of them in a space requires about 100 minutes of maintenance every year, that facilities person who has to go do that, and you multiply that by the number of signs that are in a space, you end up talking about real money. And the maintenance of life safety systems really swamps the actual like PO, bill of material cost. Self-luminous signs bring that maintenance down to zero, saves time and money. That long 20-year lifetime means that you don't have to do it for a long period of time. And the fact that there's no wires that go to it means it's even easier to get installed. So it's really, it's a way to really reduce labor, cost, and maintenance obligations. But there's even more than just that. There's like these special applications. Obviously, no AC power shows up in weird places, but all of a sudden, this opens us up to things like wet and hazardous environments too, because they're non-electrical signs. And then also in places where there are temporary, movable, or historic walls. And so I think the best way to kind of highlight these things is through the applications. And this list, of course, is by no means exhaustive. These are just sort of some of my favorites that represent a broad class of applications. And so starting off with our museum here, this could really be described maybe better as places with historical facades, places where maybe it's stone construction that are going through a code update that require egress marking in places where it didn't exist before, or the usage of the space has changed such that now there's more occupied spaces which require egress marking. Again, in these situations, that no AC power thing is so compelling because you don't want to jackhammer through the stone facade of a historical building like you can see in this museum here. And so it really adds the convenience and flexibility on the installation side. Moving over, places where there are mixed indoor-outdoor spaces or damp, potentially wet locations. Again, the availability of AC power in certain places, in places like arenas or outdoor facilities, means that the self-luminous exit sign finds a really good home here, because you don't want to have to bring wire in this instance to like this little exit gate, because nothing else on the interior of this stadium, maybe if anything even needs power at all, it's not going to be down there. And it's kind of a challenging environment because in some instances it's going to be indoors, in some instances it's going to be outdoors. And the other piece to this puzzle is, even if the space is potentially like unoccupied or it's sort of not used in the same way throughout the year, the obligations according to NFPA 101, they don't go away. So that means that you have to keep labor on staff to go and maintain traditional exit signs. In this instance, because that maintenance goes away, it actually really works in service of the building type and some of the unique constraints of it. One of the other areas where we see a lot of usage of self-luminous exit signs is in partition walls. And a ballroom, a hotel ballroom, is really a great example of where this shows up. And it also highlights that you don't have to be all self-luminous or bust. You can actually use different types of exit signs focused on the application. So for those of you who are familiar with hotel ballrooms, this will be review, but the way that these often work is they'll have big partition walls, and you can actually see it on the left side there. There's that thing that looks like a door that goes from floor to ceiling, and the coffering stops there. When this room isn't being used in like a wedding, like shown in the picture, it's being used as separate meeting spaces. There will be a partition wall that's blocking off that space. And because that changes the use of the space, it may require an egress path on it. Now, those partition walls, those movable temporary walls, don't have AC power embedded in them. There's no AC power in that track. They're just big manual devices. And as such, there's no way to mark that egress path other than through something like a self-luminous sign. And that really goes for all temporary structures, whether they be indoor or outdoor. In the midst of COVID, we saw a lot of like restaurants and breweries having tents in outdoor spaces that would be useful during the day. Those require egress marking. Self-luminous exit signs are a way to do that. And the last application, but certainly not the least, is things like industrial spaces. And this is kind of an interesting one, because the traditional way to deal with a hazardous location, like a class 1 div 2 type location where there may be flammable vapors or flammable dust in the air, is to use an exit sign that is potted and sealed, and they can be very, very costly. Self-luminous exit signs have nothing that could ignite that flammable gas or particulate in the space, and so they're rated for use in those hazardous locations. The other industrial spaces, the other thing that industrial spaces have that's fairly unique, is even wider temperature ranges than you would usually consider in a lot of applications. And so the thing that comes up all the time is like walk-in refrigerators that maybe get below that magical -40 degrees Fahrenheit that like a cold weather battery powered exit sign can do. So the wide temperature range of a self-luminous exit sign, -67 to 176 degrees Fahrenheit, means that this goes in a lot of applications, from the coldest deep freeze freezer up to places like forges where there's like molten metal around and the temperatures can be pretty extreme. This is also interesting because a lot of these places have been exempt from code historically, and as jurisdictions adopt more modern code, a lot of those industrial spaces require more egress marking than they have historically. The product offering, there's no new self-luminous exit signs, but as a reminder, we sort of have everything that might cover what you need. The SLX60 with a plastic frame, an aluminum framed 2040-01, a thin architectural thin line, which is the 880. And if you need things like vandal resistance and some additional impact resistance, you can get a recessed self-luminous sign, the 2040-80. And I want to just close this presentation, as I mentioned before, with a couple frequently asked or commonly asked questions. And these come up all the time, and I really want to make sure that you guys are armed as you're out there on the front lines with the actual facts and the simple versions of these answers. All this stuff is in the cut sheets in one way or another, but the pigs and bunny version, I think, makes it a lot more clear. And so, I've listed what I think the sort of the top 5 issues are. The first and foremost, are they bright enough? This question comes up when people look at a self-luminous exit sign and say that this doesn't look illuminated. And the answer is yes. They're actually listed by UL, they're verified by a third party, and they meet the 100-foot visibility requirements. The way that works is when there's enough light in the space, the front actually acts as a reflector, and when it's dim, it acts as a diffuser. And so the combination of those two things means that it has 100-foot visibility on the sign. The next most important question is, are self-luminous signs radioactive? And the answer is no. They contain sealed radioactive material, but they themselves are not radioactive. It's true of a lot of different types of devices that they may have radioactivity, but they themselves are not radioactive. So it's okay to be in next to these signs. How long do they last? They're rated for either 10 or 20 years based off of the model number of them. What happens behind the scenes is we just inject more tritium gas into those tubes, and then you get more of the gas, more of the radioactivity until you get to that half-life where it's not bright enough against the phosphor. Are they dangerous if they break? The answer to this is no. The amount of radioactivity in that tritium gas is very low. It's actually a naturally occurring substance in the atmosphere. And even if you were to like sit next to a broken sign where all the little tubes inside broke, you still wouldn't actually get more radiation than you would if you went and got an X-ray at the dentist. In the previous chalk talk that I gave, there was like a good slide that showed the relative amounts of radiation of various things compared to tritium gas. And like even just taking a plane flight or living in like Denver that has less atmosphere between them and the sun is more radiation than you're going to get even if you break one of these signs. And then last but certainly not least is the handling issues. These do have some special handling issues. First and foremost, at order time, we're going to ask where they're going and who the responsible party is. That's so that we can register that on the customer's behalf with the NRC, just so they know where the nuclear materials are going. And then the end of life disposition of them means that they have to be disposed of in a proper way. And that's a service that we offer, and we even give a little discount on a replacement sign in those applications. So we handle all that stuff for you, and we make that pretty easy. But there is a little bit more than just a traditional like AC powered exit sign. With all that said, there's not a lot of new stuff other than that highlight video. So spec sheets, drawings, all the forms and documents I just mentioned, they're already available on the website. That highlight video is going to get posted on the front page of the website next week, so look forward to that. If you're an internet sleuth, you might be able to find it on Vimeo now. I noticed yesterday that there were some views, so people have started to find that. And then as always, as a follow-up to this, you're going to get access to me giving this presentation, the slides of the presentation itself. So if you guys want to go and present this to other people in your agency or to your customers or friends and family, you'll certainly be able to do that. And then as a little bit of a, maybe not a warning, but an advisory, we're going to have new price books going out here in the next 30 to 60 days. So look forward to that. The self-luminous pricing isn't going to change, but some other devices will. So price book updates coming, as well as next month's challenge. Look forward to that. As always, I'm Evan Ackman. Greg Keel and Matt Bird are on the line. If you guys want to talk more about self-luminous exit signs or anything else that we do, we know that you're out there fighting a good fight, and anything that we can do to support you, we are in for. So if you want to schedule a webinar, a live meeting, please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. All right. Well, thank you all for joining. Have a great day.